12 species, each representing the most powerful civilizations in the known universe, had gathered. The room, carved from the black stone of a long-dead asteroid, was a fitting stage for interstellar diplomacy. Cold, stark, and indifferent, at the head of the council, towering over the rest, stood Euragos, the warlord of the Kargat Dominion. His armor shimmered with the heat of a battle-scarred world, and his eyes gleamed with the fury of a species that had never known defeat. Euragos sneered at the human delegation standing before him. "You are weak," he growled. "Your species is fragile, divided. We see no reason to recognize you as equals. Prove yourselves or be forgotten." The council sat in silence, waiting for the humans to falter, as so many others had done before them when facing the Kargath. Humanity, after all, was a recent addition to the galactic stage. Their expansion into the stars had been swift, but not without conflict. Yet, compared to the Kargath, whose empire spanned millennia of conquest, humans seemed insignificant. Stephen Smith, the human ambassador, stepped forward. His tall, unassuming frame gave no hint of the soldier's history he carried beneath his diplomatic exterior. Smith had seen more of war than most in that chamber, though his eyes held none of the brutality Euragos boasted. Instead, they reflected something else: understanding, experience. "Challenging us to war would be a mistake," Smith said. His calm demeanor only seemed to irritate Euragos, who let out a low growl. "Is that a refusal? Are you too afraid to fight?" Smith smiled faintly. "You misunderstand. We're not refusing war because we fear you. We're refusing because we understand war in ways you cannot imagine." The council murmured, intrigued. Euragos slammed a fist against the stone table. Words from a species that has never fought a war on the scale of the Kargath. You speak of understanding, but your kind has yet to face true destruction. Smith remained composed. "On the contrary, our history is defined by destruction, by battles fought not just for territory, but for survival. If you wish for war, I won't stop you. But first, let me show you why we are the last species you should ever provoke." The chamber fell into a tense silence. Euragos narrowed his eyes, his arrogance flickering as the council shifted in their seats. They had heard tales of humanity's resilience, their rapid rise from a fractured planet to a spacefaring race. But Euragos still believed them unworthy of true consideration. Now, however, curiosity had replaced certainty. The Kargath warlord leaned back, his lips curling into a sneer. "Very well, human. Amuse us with your stories of conflict. But remember, no history lesson will change your fate if you fail to impress." Smith nodded and signaled to a small device on his wrist. A series of holographic projections began to materialize in the air above the chamber, swirling into scenes of destruction, conquest, and survival. "War," Smith began, "is not merely the clash of armies. It is the breaking of societies, the testing of wills, and the cost of victory that often outweighs its reward." The chamber grew darker as the holographic displays flickered back to life. Stephen Smith stepped forward, his face illuminated by the shifting images of humanity's past. The alien council watched in silence, their earlier arrogance replaced by cautious curiosity. Euragos, the Kargath warlord, leaned forward, his fierce eyes narrowing as he awaited the first example of humanity's so-called brutal history. Smith's voice was steady, as if recounting a story he had told many times before. "We begin with the Mongols," he said, gesturing toward a vast plain that appeared above the council chamber, stretching out into the horizon. In the early 13th century, a man named Genghis Khan united the nomadic tribes of Central Asia under a single banner. What followed was one of the most relentless and ruthless campaigns of conquest in our history. The holographic plains gave way to columns of mounted warriors, Mongol horsemen charging across the steppe with terrifying speed and precision. In their wake, cities burned and kingdoms crumbled. The council watched as entire populations were wiped out, their defenses no match for the Mongols' superior tactics and psychological warfare. Smith's voice remained calm, almost detached, as he narrated the scenes of devastation. They did not just defeat their enemies, they obliterated them, Smith continued. The Mongols employed strategies that had never been seen before. Feigned retreats, deceptive maneuvers, and the use of terror as a weapon. Cities that refused to surrender were annihilated, their populations slaughtered. Survivors were left only to spread fear to the next target. In less than 50 years, the Mongols controlled the largest contiguous empire in human history. Urego scoffed, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps a glimmer of respect. Brutal, yes, he grunted, but nothing the Kargath could not accomplish. Smith offered a small, measured nod. Perhaps, but the Mongols were not merely conquerors. They reshaped the world, not just through destruction, but by creating a network of trade and culture that linked entire continents. And yet, despite their strength, they too fell, brought down not by an enemy's blade, but by internal division and overextension. Power, as you will learn, is always fleeting. The image shifted. The Mongol Empire fading into the background as a new, more modern battlefield took shape. A thick, murky fog enveloped the scene. Trenches lined with barbed wire stretched endlessly into the distance, and soldiers huddled in the mud, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow. This, Smith said, his tone growing graver, is World War I. Fought in the early 20th century, it was unlike any war that had come before it. Millions died, and yet for most of the conflict, no side could claim true victory. This was not a war of conquest or glory. It was a war of attrition, of endurance. Those who survived did so not because they were the strongest, but because they endured hell itself. The council flinched as the holograms showed men charging out of trenches, only to be cut down by machine gun fire. Poison gas billowed across the battlefield, and the ground was littered with the bodies of the fallen. For 4 years, entire nations bled for inches of ground. Soldiers fought in horrific conditions, cold, wet, starving. Many went mad. Victory was measured not in land gained, but in lives lost. A soft murmur ran through the council. Uregos clenched his fists, his confidence shaken by the sight of such senseless slaughter. This was not the kind of warfare he was accustomed to, the endless clash of armies, the pursuit of glory and conquest. This was something far darker. And still, Smith continued, it was just the beginning. The scene changed again, shifting to the mid-20th century. This time, the images were more familiar to the human members of the council. Tanks rumbling through streets, planes dropping bombs over cities, and mushroom clouds rising into the sky. Smith's voice took on a sharper edge as he introduced the next chapter in humanity's history of war. World War II, he said simply, letting the weight of the words hang in the air. The deadliest conflict in our history. Entire nations mobilized for war. Not just soldiers, but civilians, economies, entire societies. It was total war. The council watched as the horrors of this war unfolded. The bombing of cities, the mass destruction of infrastructure, the cold efficiency of human weaponry. Smith spoke of the Normandy invasion, where human soldiers braved the storm of enemy fire to liberate occupied territories. He described the Eastern Front, where entire armies were lost in the freezing Russian winter, and the Pacific Theater, where naval battles raged across the vast expanse of ocean. But it was a final image that silenced the council completely, the doomsday bomb. The mushroom cloud rose above the council chamber, casting a shadow over everything. Smith's voice was low, almost reverent, as he spoke of the bombings of 2 cities. How, in a single moment, hundreds of thousands of lives were wiped out. How humanity had unlocked the power to destroy entire cities with a single weapon. Victory in World War II came at a cost, Smith said, his voice heavy. We unleashed a force so terrible that it changed the course of history forever. The world has never been the same, and we learned that sometimes the price of victory is too high to bear. Uregos was silent now, his earlier bravado gone. The rest of the council sat in stunned contemplation, the weight of humanity's history settling over them like a shroud. Smith could see the flickers of fear in their eyes. the slow realization that humanity was not the naive, fragile race they had believed. Smith let the silence linger for a moment longer before stepping back. "This is just a glimpse of what we are capable of," he said quietly. "We have fought wars on scales that few in this room can comprehend. We have seen the worst of ourselves and survived." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "But we are not here to boast. We are here to show you the truth. That war, for us, is not a path to glory or strength. It is a reminder of the cost of survival. And if you seek to challenge us, you must understand, victory may come, but the price you pay will be more than you can afford." The council remained silent, the images of humanity's brutal wars still fresh in their minds. Uragos' gaze met Smith's, and for the first time, the warlord seemed to hesitate. The challenge he had so eagerly issued now seemed far more daunting. Smith took a deep breath, his expression unreadable. "Now, let me show you what the future holds." The room was still heavy with the aftermath of humanity's brutal history, the weight of wars fought and lives lost hanging like an oppressive cloud. Uragos, the Kargath warlord, sat in a rare silence, his fists clenched as he processed the horrors he had just witnessed. The Galactic Council, too, seemed subdued, their once haughty demeanor softened by a growing sense of unease. Stephen Smith stood before them, unyielding. The holograms had vanished, leaving the chamber dimly lit once more. But Smith wasn't finished. He raised his wrist, activating the holographic display once again, though this time the images were unfamiliar, alien, even to the humans in the room. "This," Smith began, "is not our past. It is our future, or at least a future that may yet come to pass." The hologram flared to life, revealing scenes that transcended the brutality of Earth's history. There were no Mongol warriors here, no trenches, no tanks. Instead, vast starships, black against the void of space, hovered ominously over planets. Automated drones, their sleek forms bristling with weapons, patrolled the skies. Massive fleets clashed in the depths of the galaxy, their weapons tearing through the fabric of space itself. Smith's voice grew colder, sharper. "The wars we have fought on Earth were devastating. Yes, but they were limited. They were fought with primitive technology, confined to a single planet. The future will not be so kind. If we ever go to war again, it will not be with swords, rifles, or even tanks. It will be with weapons that can destroy entire worlds." The council members shifted uneasily. Uragos' eyes narrowed, the flicker of uncertainty growing in their depths. "What are you saying, human?" he growled. "That you could destroy us all?" Smith didn't answer immediately. He let the images speak for him. Starships bombarding planets, wiping out civilizations in seconds. A massive battle between AI-controlled fleets, stretching across the stars, fought with no human input at all. Autonomous machines, driven by cold logic and ruthless efficiency, hunted down their enemies with merciless precision. "Our future wars will not be fought by soldiers, but by machines," Smith said finally. "AI systems designed for one purpose: destruction. They will not hesitate. They will not question. They will simply carry out their programming, obliterating everything in their path until the enemy is no more." A planet, distant and serene, appeared in the hologram. Seconds later, a weapon unlike anything the Council had seen before, an orbital superweapon, fired. The planet erupted in a fiery inferno, its atmosphere boiling away, its surface shattered into molten debris. In mere moments, it was reduced to a lifeless husk, spinning aimlessly through space. "This is the power we have begun to harness," Smith said quietly. "A single weapon capable of erasing an entire world. It's not just a theory. We already have the technology. If we are pushed to that point again, if humanity ever finds itself in another total war, there will be nothing left. Not for us and not for anyone else." The Council was silent. The threat of nuclear annihilation had already shaken them, but this was something beyond even their worst fears. Uragos, once so confident in his species' superiority, now sat with his jaw clenched, his eyes dark with doubt. He understood war, but this was not war. It was extinction. Smith continued, his voice steady, but carrying an undeniable edge. The Kargath are strong. I don't doubt your abilities in battle, nor the fierceness of your warriors. But you have never faced an enemy like us. We don't just fight to win. We fight to survive, and we do whatever it takes, no matter the cost. The hologram shifted once more, this time showing humanity's home, Earth. It was peaceful now. The scars of past wars healed over time, but still, beneath that calm surface, lay the knowledge of destruction. We have learned the hard way that war does not bring glory. It brings ruin. We have fought ourselves, nearly destroyed ourselves, to learn this. And now we avoid war, not because we are weak, but because we understand what it leads to. Smith turned to Uragos, his expression unreadable. You wanted to challenge us. You wanted to see if we were worthy of your respect. But let me ask you, do you truly want to fight us? Do you want to risk everything, your people, your world, on the assumption that you will win? Uragos said nothing, but the tension in the room was palpable. The once arrogant warlord now seemed unsure, his bravado crumbling under the weight of what he had seen. The other council members watched him, waiting for his response, but none spoke. The images of destruction lingered in their minds, the terrible reality of what war with humans could bring. Smith gave him no time to recover. We are not like you. We don't seek war, but if war comes to us, we will meet it with everything we have. And I promise you this, you will not like the outcome. The room fell into a deep, uneasy silence. Uragos' jaw tightened, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and fear, but he did not speak. He had seen enough. The Kargath might be the strongest species in the galaxy, but even they could not withstand the total annihilation humanity was capable of unleashing. The council remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Uragos stood, his broad shoulders slumping ever so slightly as he nodded to Smith. There will be no war, he growled, his voice heavy with reluctant respect. Your lesson has been learned. With that, the Kargath warlord turned and stormed out of the chamber, leaving the council in stunned silence. The decision had been made. Humanity had proven its worth. Not through violence, but through the promise of it. Smith stood alone in the center of the room, watching as the council members quietly adjourned. His mission was complete. The galaxy had been warned. Humanity was not to be trifled with. And as he watched them leave, Smith allowed himself a small, weary smile. The future was safe, for now.